When a warrior retreats to a cave, it is not to hide, it is to see more clearly. When he studies rivers, it is not to admire them, but to learn how to flow. And when he gazes at the mountains, he does so not to conquer, but to become still. Nature, in the life of Miyamoto Musashi, was never background scenery. It was the battlefield, the teacher, the mirror, and eventually the sanctuary. In this episode, we explore how Musashi's interaction with natural landscapes symbolized his inner transformation, from a wild swordsman into a philosopher of flow, stillness, and self-mastery. You're watching The Unfolding Journey, a channel where we don't just revisit history, we extract wisdom. We explore lives that changed the world and trace the moments where inner growth aligned with outer journey. If stories of personal evolution, discipline, and transformation inspire you, then you're exactly where you need to be. Let's unfold the story of Musashi through rivers, rocks, and sky. Miyamoto Musashi wasn't shaped in temples or training halls. His earliest lessons were forged in the raw outdoors, on forest paths, mountain ridges, riverbanks, and open fields. As a self-made ronin, Musashi had no dojo. His teachers were not cloaked monks or noble lords, but wind and rain, solitude and silence. The forest became his arena, the mountains his inner compass. The weather taught him timing. The earth beneath his feet kept him grounded. This connection between warrior and wild gave Musashi something no formal school could: raw adaptability. He learned how to strike like lightning, to wait like stone, to move like wind. Nature was not separate from his training, it was the training. In the Book of Five Rings, Musashi opens with the Earth Scroll, the ground from which all else emerges. It represents fundamentals: stance, balance, foundation, and discipline. But on a symbolic level, Earth is more than footing. It's about presence, about not being moved by fear, by ego, or by distraction. The Earth isn't fast. It isn't flashy, but it endures. Musashi often retreated into the mountains to reconnect with this stillness. He wasn't running from society, he was returning to solid ground. The high cliffs reflected the unshakable mind he was trying to cultivate. In battle, it's easy to be swept away by emotion. Earth taught him to stand firm, to act only when necessary and with full intent. The second scroll in the Book of Five Rings is water, fluid, flexible, formless. It takes the shape of its container, adapts to its environment, and moves without resistance. For Musashi, water was the metaphor for mastery. In his duels, he never repeated a pattern. He flowed around opponents, changed rhythms mid-fight, and used their structure against them. His connection to rivers and streams symbolized this idea. A river never pushes, yet it carves valleys. It doesn't force, it wears down the mountain through consistency. Musashi learned to fight not with aggression, but with timing, flow, and intuition. And perhaps more importantly, he learned how to live with the same principles. Musashi was no passive sage. He was a warrior who engaged in over 60 life-or-death duels, and remained undefeated. That fire, the capacity for swift, decisive action, is explored in his Fire Scroll. In nature, fire transforms. It consumes, purifies, and renews. For Musashi, fire was the energy of the moment, when action must be taken without hesitation, with full focus. His time in harsh wilderness environments, battling not just men but hunger, cold, and loneliness, sharpened this flame. But he also knew, fire left unchecked becomes destruction. So he didn't glorify aggression. Instead, he tempered it with awareness, knowing when to ignite and when to stay still. Like lightning during a storm, brilliant, quick, and gone, Musashi's strikes were rarely loud or angry, but always final. In the Wind Scroll, Musashi examines not just himself, but other schools of thought and combat. It's a metaphor for learning from others, sensing their rhythms, and seeing through illusion. Symbolically, wind is invisible, yet felt. It cannot be seen, but its effects are unmistakable. Musashi spent years walking the land, observing swordsmen, absorbing their philosophies, not to imitate, but to understand. This is reflected in his deep connection to the open plains and breezy cliffside edges, where wind shaped the land without ever being seen. He realized that the warrior must not just be strong, but perceptive. He must feel his opponent's energy before they move. He must sense the mood of the moment. And above all, he must avoid becoming too rigid. Because like wind, true mastery is in movement, not in holding. And then comes the final scroll, void. This isn't emptiness in a negative sense. It's not despair nor nihilism. Rather, void is pure presence. It's the space between thoughts, the silence between breaths, the moment before the strike. Musashi described void as the place from which all knowledge, action, and intuition arise. It is the absence of form, where form is born. In nature, void is the night sky, the fog over the field, the stillness of a cave. This is where Musashi spent his final years, in the Ryagando cave, writing his teachings and meditating. Not surrounded by followers, not in a palace, but in silence, in stone, facing the great unknown. The cave was the perfect symbol of void. It gave no answers, made no sound, and reflected only what the seeker brought into it. Musashi understood that after all the swordplay, the wandering, the study, the ultimate victory was to dissolve the self into something greater. For Musashi, the sword was a tool, not just to fight, but to study the self. Nature was his dojo, his scroll, and his shrine. He saw in the wind, water, and stone not just beauty, but instruction. In a time when warriors sought honor through conquest, Musashi found honor through reflection. He reminds us today, if you want to master the blade, first listen to the river. If you want to win the battle, first become still like the mountain. And if you want to understand life, first learn from nature. Miyamoto Musashi's journey was not just about martial mastery, it was about harmony with the world and with himself. Through nature, he discovered principles that guided both his blade and his soul. From stone to stream, from flame to wind, from earth to void, he followed a path that asked not only how to fight, but how to live. If this exploration of Musashi's spiritual landscape spoke to something inside you, if you felt the mountain, the river, or the cave calling, then you've only begun your journey. Subscribe to The Unfolding Journey for more stories where myth meets meaning, where history reveals wisdom, and where landscapes teach us to live with more purpose and presence. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next path we explore. The journey continues. Walk it with us.